One by one.
Grazie. Adesso Margherita.
Well, first and foremost, my background is in music. I'm a singer-songwriter. And people often said to me when a new single came out or a new record, even before they asked me something about the music, they asked me, well, what do you think about women in the world of music today? That was always the question wherever I went. And I said, well, I need to look into that a little bit, as a matter of fact. And so I took a look at all of the female composers from the 16th century to the 19th century, and in the late 18th century there was a perfect setting. There was a lot of choral formats then as well, and very few people know about these kind of institutions and structures. Nobody knows about what really happened there. There's very little research, and so I can choose any music I like, in a sense. It's a film that talks about imagination, their incredible imagination, and their very profound expression of themselves. And so that's why I put in this music. I decided I could have present-day music as well. We'll never know what kind of music they were playing, as a matter of fact. It was very philological. Let me explain what I mean. And we looked into the Baroque composers. We looked at these traditional instruments. There are violins made with the kind of catgut string that was used back then. Maddalena Laura Sirmen is the late 18th century orphan who we have records about, and we only have records of her because she was married to a musician. So it was very carefully researched, and that was the only basis that we could take for a foundation. That is the foundation stone for the rest of our flights of imagination. There's the creation of these girls, and their musical imagination runs wild. Perhaps there's magical realism in that music. And as to genre definitions, I'm not so strict about those. I can imagine what you're getting at when you refer to magical realism, but it's really about creativity and imagination. So there's something magic in that because it's something that comes from within us. I think that just like in real life, people really are all kinds of different things. They have a whole host of different levels and complexity within them. And this is a film which is a bit like a choir with lots of different voices, all very different, but driven by the same urgency, the same desire. We all express that in different ways. There's scope to dream up a different future, a different universe for themselves. They're bold enough to do that. That's the most beautiful thing about it, that they have the courage to do that. And perhaps it's partly because of the place where they are as well. They've been in this location for their entire life, most of them at least. That unites them, but they're also united by music. They play day in and day out. Music making is an escape route for them as well, but it's also something which really is their very own. It's their very own thing in this very oppressive context. There have always been women making music. They're often in courts. And so their social status was somewhat ambiguous. They could be artists, singers, composers, whereas in mainstream society, women weren't allowed to do that. And there needs to be a degree of freedom, of course, in social terms, to be accepted as a female artist, certainly back in history. And so I'm trying to say that, as a matter of fact, there were indeed some such composers who were known at the time, but now they're not well known. Some people don't even know that these kind of institutions existed back then. Vivaldi had 300 girls or so, so there was an orchestra of 300 girls. He was at La Pietà for 40 years, and many of Vivaldi's works seem to have drawn, or may have drawn, on compositions written by the girls. You said it would be better to be more historical, so Perhaps it would have been better, you were saying, I think, to talk about the women who really did exist, but who are they? Where are they? This is more of a fable than a historical film as such. And when you have a fable, you need to start from a solid foundation, but talk more about the idea of creativity and not about specific creative women, with specific biographical details. I don't know. I think that if I'm talking more about a concept than about an individual person. I think you can talk about more female artists at the end of the day. And to be frank, there are some, but really just a handful, and nobody knows who they are. So I thought it was better to have a film about people who are completely unknown. There were so many women who were completely unknown, and just a few out of millions who were successful. I'm looking at you because it was you who wrote it with me. Maybe you have something to add. Well, yes, we did actually wonder about exactly that when we started doing our research. We picked out a few female figures. I mean, but there were so many of them. There were lots and lots of them, actually, at the time. We were fascinated by these specific kinds of institutions, these orphan girls who didn't have families to support them, and they were outstanding musicians, but they were concealed, hidden away. It's all a question of imagination. It's not supposed to be a precise historical document. It's more of a concept, the concept of female creativity, which had more trouble in breaking through. It's obvious that it existed and that these women existed as well. There were great opera singers, for example. When it comes to female composers, they had a hard time. And I wanted to talk about all of those female composers who have been hidden in the annals of history. Unfortunately, there were a few who were successful.
Prego, sì.